Welcome to the Family Builders Podcast. No matter what our family dynamic is, we can all use some help from time to time. Our hope and prayer is that this podcast is a help and a blessing to you each and every week. And now our host, Pastor David Moore, and co-host, Pastor A.J. Harold.
Hello, fellow builders. Welcome to this week's episode of the Family Builders Podcast. Time to buckle on your tool belts and put on your hard hats and join us as we get to work this week on the subject of communications with our family. We hope that this episode will be a real blessing to you as you learn to talk to your kids and to talk with your kids and your spouses as we talk about this topic of communications. Welcome. This is your humble host, Pastor David Moore from Lakeview Baptist Church in Newcastle, Oklahoma. And joining me from high up top the Hollywood Hills in his Crystal Studios, Pastor A.J. Harold. Brother A.J., how are you today?
Hey, once again, I'm doing great. Love these podcasts. I'm excited about this one as well.
Amen. I am as well. You know, we had an opportunity this past week. My wife and I, we left on Saturday and flew up to Central Illinois where my dad lives. My birthday is on May 4th, and my dad's birthday is on May 5th. And so we flew up there. He didn't know we were coming. We took an Uber from the airport over to his house and had them drop us off a couple of doors down. And then I called my dad on my cell phone and was talking to him and told him I was out for a walk with my wife, which was true. And we walked down the street pulling our luggage, and he and I were just having a conversation about day-to-day things. And I walked up on his porch and knocked on the door, and my sister was there and she opened the door, and we walked in, and my dad was sitting there on the phone, and he was so surprised to see us. And he actually said into the phone, "I got to go. Somebody's here." And he hung up. I was the somebody, and my wife was somebody. So it was really, really cool. He was really taken aback and surprised, pleasantly, I think. We were able to visit with him and go to church with him on his birthday. And we really had a great time visiting with him. And then we left on Monday, rented a car, drove a few hours north to Michigan, got to meet our seventh grandchild. Our little grandson was born just about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. And what a blessing it was. And I got to share this. You know, I'm not just bragging about my kids and grandkids, but this was such a blessing. On Monday, we got to my son's house, and they have a 4-year-old as well as the newborn. And so we took them out to supper Monday night, and all day we'd been rather concerned because Oklahoma was expecting really severe storms on Monday evening, to the point that banks were closing at 3 o'clock and sending their employees home because of the impending severe weather. They said on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 9 that we were going to get tornadoes and possibly softball-sized hail. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen hail that was the size of a softball, but it's basically like someone shooting at you with a whole battalion of cannons. It's horrific, the damage that it can do. So we were very concerned. Obviously, I mean, we live here in Oklahoma. Our house is right on the main track for bad storms, it seems. And so we were very concerned. All day we were just praying, Lord, protect our home, protect our family and our loved ones and our friends and our church family and stuff, just all day long. And so we were sitting at supper with my son and daughter-in-law and the 4-year-old and the newborn. And I pulled out my phone, I pulled up the radar, and there was some bad storms, but they were all going north of Oklahoma City. And I remarked to my wife, I said, "Isn't that something?" I said, all your line of storms that come through is going north of the city. And I said, we have been praying all day, and the Lord's just provided, protection. And my 4-year-old looked at me and he said, "Well, Grandpa, let's just pray right now." And he bowed his head and he began to pray. And he said, dear Lord, please protect Grandpa's house and protect our family. And thank you for loving us. Just such simple child's trusting prayer. And I got to tell you, Grandpa had some stuff in his eye, both eyes, for about 10 minutes after. It was just so awesome. It was really a great visit. We got back yesterday, late last night, and we're tired, but we're happy and just excited to get back to work here with the podcast. So today, I wanted to remind you all, we do have a Facebook page. And Brother AJ, you put a really interesting question on our Facebook group last week. Why don't you just talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for jumping in and joining us with that question and response. In fact, today people are still responding. That's a blessing. But I simply asked this question. I said, what's your life verse? I explained what a life verse was, in my opinion, and we had over 20 comments on that. Now, if you haven't done so, you can go to our Facebook page at Family Builders Podcast, find the post that says what's your life verse or your favorite verse, and I'd encourage you to share it. It has been nothing but a blessing to read everyone's life verses. And so it's been good.
It really has been fun, and I do have a little bit of a complaint. Am I allowed to voice that?
Oh, yeah. I could always edit it out.
All right. So my complaint is this: it's kind of like when we sing favorite hymns at church. Who, in their right mind, in a field of sanity, only has one favorite hymn? We have over 500 hymns in the songbook, and I tell you, I like at least 502 of them. It's the same way with Bible verses. I've got a whole bunch of verses that I really love that have meant something to me my whole life. My call to ministry is Isaiah 6:8, but my confidence in salvation is the one I shared, Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, being confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will be able to complete it until the day of redemption. I love that verse, but I also love Isaiah 6:8. Also, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Then said I, here am I, send me. So that's just two of about 600 life verses that I have. So I'm a little upset that you said one, but okay, we'll let it slide this time, I guess. All right. Anyway, so I want to encourage you, get on the Facebook group, join the group, like the page, comment, share, interact. Let's build a family builders community. As time grows, I'm sure there'll be opportunities for us to share helpful hints. Your hints, who knows? Your helpful hint might make it on as our weekly builders tip some week. So make sure that you like and share and comment on that so that you can see more of what is on the Facebook page. That's really important because I mentioned a couple of weeks ago we were getting ready to have another contest, and we've had something in the works now for a little over a month. I think we've been working on this about 6 weeks, and we are working on developing a logo for our podcast, kind of a brand representation. Brother AJ, when I moved to Oklahoma, this is one of the few states that does not have a front license plate on your car. And I asked my son that lived here, why is that? And he said it's because the rear plate, you put the license plate, but on the front, you rep your school because you have Oklahoma University or Oklahoma State University. And let me tell you, you don't like both. You like the one, you must hate the other. Or like the other, you must hate the one. That's the way it is. So we want you to rep our podcast, if you will. We're having some shirts made up, some hats, some merchandise, really sharp looking, very, very professional. I just can't emphasize enough how excited we are about this representation of the podcast. We will help. I believe it will really help get the word out to other people. It'll give you an opportunity to be kind of an ambassador for our podcast. So we're going to post on Facebook in a week or two, when we have it all finished and ready to go. We're going to post on Facebook an image of our new logo, our new brand representation. And once we do that, the first 5 people who like that particular comment, not just any comment, you have to like that picture. You have to share that picture. And then you have to comment on that picture, on the new logo. The first 5 people will get their choice of a t-shirt or a hat or a book bag with our logo on it. And we'll contact you. You can tell us the size. We'll have it sent directly to your home, and it will be awesome. This is valuable prizes here, folks. We're not talking, little $2 or $3 things. We're talking these are going to be really sharp. They're not terribly expensive. They're affordable. They'll make wonderful Christmas presents for your family. They'll make beautiful presents for birthdays and anniversaries, or just for you to have to wear, right? Just ask that you do this. If you're going to be out in public doing something not building your family, don't wear the representation of our podcast. All right. We don't want to get a bad reputation, but we're excited about it. We think this will be a real beneficial and a chance to really look sharp and to represent the podcast that hopefully has been a blessing to you.
And I want to give the definition of the word brand. Most of us know that it is to burn or impress a mark with a hot iron. Our desire as believers, as family builders, is to let our light so shine before men that men may see our good works and not pat us on the back, but give God the glory. And so instead of wearing your favorite sports team or this, that, and the other, and there's nothing wrong with that, but here's an opportunity to see a brand that actually will point people to Christ. That's our desire on this podcast and our lives, is to give honor and glory to God. And so help us by liking, sharing, commenting, doing all those things, and we'll get the word out so that other families can be built on the rock.
Amen. Yeah, we're excited about that. And you mentioned about wearing sports teams jerseys and stuff. Most of the people involved in professional sports today are not people you would allow into your home. They're famous because of athletic ability, and that's awesome. I love sports. I like to watch sports. I have my favorite players on my favorite team that I like to watch play sports. I would never and have never held them up before my children as someone they want to be like. And I've made sure my kids understood I appreciate their ability in sports. I don't care for their opinion on society. I don't vote because they say to vote for a certain person or not. I'm not interested in a thing that they represent that they're just being paid for. They don't really believe any of the stuff that they say when they're doing the commercials and stuff. They don't use those products. It's not gonna, Tom Brady can't throw a football into his 50s because he drank orange juice or whatever the situation might be. I'm not picking on Tom Brady. That was just the first person that came to my mind. But I think it's important. We have an opportunity here to represent Jesus Christ. When you wear that Family Builders Podcast hat or T-shirt, you're not representing Pastor Harold. You're not representing Pastor Moore. You're representing a resource for people to hear from the Word of God. And so I really want to encourage people to take advantage of that, help us out, and grow this community of family builders. All right, time for this week's Builders Tip. Brother AJ, I've got a really important one, and I want everybody to listen very carefully. You ready? It's a one-word tip. Breathe. I'm going to say it again. Breathe. Maybe you've seen someone who is hurt, and first responders, medical personnel are telling them, okay, breathe. I remember seeing that one time at a man had passed out, and somebody called 911. The ambulance came, and he was awake and alert and stuff. He just had a medical situation, and he was kind of panicking a little bit. And the ambulance worker just said, okay, breathe. And I remember thinking, that's kind of a silly instruction to give somebody. I mean, nobody has to tell me to breathe. I breathe because I like to be alive. I breathe in, I breathe out. Feels good. I like it. I like to breathe. Why do you tell somebody to breathe? It's because in a moment of panic, you instinctively worry about the situation you're panicking on, and you can forget even the most basic principles of if I don't breathe, I'm not alive. What a great thought to put into your family. If you're in a moment of making a decision that's going to affect your family, before you make the decision, breathe. If you're going to say something to your spouse or to your children, before you say it, breathe. When you're doing something and having fun and enjoyable time as a family, take a second and breathe. Experience the moment of what you're going, so you have that memory locked in. This idea of breathing, that's our builder's tip for this week, is just remember to breathe.
Yeah, as you were talking, that is a great builder's tip. And it made me remember how many times I've said as a father, relax or calm down. I have said breathe, when they get hurt or when they slam their finger in the door or whatever, it's before I could address the actual issue, I have to get them to breathe, to relax. So I appreciate that. It's so simple. When you said one word, I was wondering, what word is this going to be? That was perfect. That was good.
Yeah. Amen. Good. I'm glad that's helpful. Well, speaking of helpful, last week we talked about how to talk to our children, and we used Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6. I think it'd be appropriate to read that verse again. It says, "Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man." Last week, we defined for you the word grace. The short definition is acceptable. So speak something that is acceptable in a way that is acceptable, showing benefit to the person receiving. And then we defined the word salt. And the short definition of salt was salt. Brother AJ, I know that's deep. Did you get that? Did you write that down?
I actually remembered.
Okay, good. But it also said prudence, which is wisdom applied to practice. And so we want to speak to our kids in a way that shows benefit, is acceptable, but also that they recognize wisdom applied to practice. And we really dwelt quite a bit on something that we want to kind of bring into this week, and that was being age appropriate in the things that we talk about, as well as the way that we talk to our kids. And, I noticed in verse 6 of Colossians, it says, "Let your speech be always with grace," not sometimes, but always. And so that's when they're infants, when they're toddlers, when they're in elementary school age, when they are in junior high, when they're in high school, when they're teenagers, when they're in college, when they're in young adult stage, when they're married, when they're parents of their own kids, always speaking to them in a way that is acceptable, showing benefit, and with salt, prudence, wisdom applied to practice. So today, last week we ran out of time a little bit, but today we wanted to pick up on a couple of things. I know Brother Harold had a fantastic observation about talking to our kids.
Yeah, there's not really a topic when you think about being age appropriate. Every topic, in my opinion, is on the table as a parent to a child or even a Sunday school teacher to a child. What is appropriate is what matters. I may be the Sunday school teacher and might think, you know what, let's talk to mom about that. Let's talk to dad about that. But every topic is on the table, but it must be age appropriate. And so, really, in no particular order, I have a few random thoughts that I'd like to share and discuss with you, Pastor Moore. And then listeners, please use our email address, use Facebook. You could message us. But if you've got questions about things that are, is this appropriate or not appropriate? How should I handle this? We're not the gurus of parenting, but God has given us his word that we would love to share with you as pastors, as believers, and help iron sharpen iron. And
Well, I would just add to that real quick. But if you're afraid of sending us an email or a message on Facebook or something and think, well, I don't want to hear this, broadcast to everybody, all you got to do is say in the message, hey, please don't use this on the podcast. We absolutely will honor that. We won't ever say that. We're not going to. I mean, if you say something bad about us, we might tell people, hey, John Smith said this terrible thing about us. No, but I'm just kidding. But no, please, we will respect your privacy. We want to be a help to you in this way.
yeah, and even as pastors, that's what we do with our own congregation or other believers. And just as believers, you don't even have to be a pastor, just out of respect for the person speaking to you, not to be gossipers and etc. And so, but with regards to our children, and not just our children, if you're in authority, uncles, grandparents, Sunday school teachers, pastors, whatever, we want to be age appropriate. And so, again, in no particular order, I want to throw this out there, and Pastor Moore, you could share your thoughts on this. But in my opinion, it's not wise for adults to talk business in front of our children. Adults shouldn't talk business in front of our children. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, we're trying to train them up in the way that they should go. Obviously, a false balance is abomination to the Lord. So let's be age appropriate. But if there's some things that are causing potential stress on mom and dad in the home, it may not be wise to just talk about that at the dinner table. So, what are your thoughts, Pastor Moore, about not talking business in front of your children?
That's a perfect understanding of that concept of the false balance because it reminded me immediately when you were talking about that about a lady that I counseled many years ago, and she had actually given me permission to share this in with other people that I was counseling. So I'm not violating any confidence here, but she had told me that when she was a child, her mom and her dad were going through a really tough time financially, and that every night when they went to bed, her mom would tell her, make sure your sister has plenty of covers on because we're probably going to get the heat shut off during the night because we didn't pay the bill. And she would say that like every night in the wintertime. And so this lady had developed kind of a complex about worrying about finances. And I thought, boy, an 8-year old doesn't need to know how serious the family's finances are. You know what? Saying something like, no, we can't go out to eat because, that costs money and we're trying to be good stewards. That's about the extent of what an 8-year old needs to know about the family finances. The 8-year old doesn't need to know that, well, first of all, you shouldn't get yourself into a position where you have bill collectors calling. If you have bill collectors calling, you need to fix that. You need to pay that thou owest. That's the Bible. That's not, I know somebody probably is hearing this and saying, well, that's easier for you to say. You have no idea what my wife and I have been through raising 5 children on a pastor's salary, which is kind of an oxymoron, the idea of a salary for a pastor. Most of my ministry, I would say 97% of the last 29 years, my wife has had to work and I have had to work full-time jobs in the secular world because the church either didn't pay us anything or because they couldn't, or because they paid us a very small amount that we could not live on. And so I do understand what it is to struggle paycheck to paycheck. I do understand what it is to throw the bills up in the air and say, okay, the ones that don't come down are the ones we'll pay this month. But you got to pay them. You got to pay those bills. I remember there were times in our younger years when we ate a lot of pancakes for supper because they were very cheap to make. And our kids could get a good meal, pancakes and eggs, back when eggs didn't cost $7 for a dozen. But we could get a cheap meal of pancakes and eggs, and the kids would be full and they could grow and be healthy, but it didn't cost us an arm and a leg because we were trying to pay all our bills. Our one of our sons, when he was born, we did not have any health insurance. And the hospital said, what can you pay? I said, I could pay $15 a week. And they said, okay. And they set up a payment arrangement. And I remember he had his 7th birthday. And about 2 months after his 7th birthday, we paid him off at $15 a week for 7 years. We paid that $15 a week. And you may say, oh, $15 a week, that's ridiculous. That's what we could afford. Legitimately, I wasn't lowballing him. We struggled to make that $15 a week payment for 7 years. But we didn't want him repossessed, and so we paid it. we made sure we covered it. But you know what? He didn't know that. He didn't. When he was 5, we didn't tell him, hey, you're costing us a lot of money. I'm not sure we can afford you. What a terrible burden to put on a child. So that's a great point about being careful not to talk, quote, business, unquote, in front of children.
Yeah, that's awesome because you've given us some don't do with real life examples. But I could say this, you kept mentioning the age, let's say 5, 7, 8, you were kind of young. Well, I'm going to move the age up to about 11, 12, 13 when my daughters were that age. They're my oldest 2. And I sat them down one day and I said, you know what? Let's write a trip to San Diego SeaWorld. Now, we live in LA, so it's not that far, no airlines and things like that. But we wrote hotels, food, tickets to it for the whole family. We got the figure. They remember the figure. We got the figure, and I showed them what I actually owed because of my poor financial stewardship every month. And when I tell you, Pastor Moore, Those two girls realized, Dad, if you were better with your finances, we could literally go to SeaWorld, hotel, great meals every month. What I was paying in debt was taking away the opportunity to go to SeaWorld literally every month. But what I was doing was what was appropriate for them, saying, girls, I made a mistake. Not even a mistake, Pastor Moore. I sinned. I was a very, very poor manager of money, and everything began to change. But I wanted them to learn, and it was appropriate for them to where I tell you now, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'll say this. They are very good with the finances that they have coming in. They're good stewards because I was appropriate at their age level, and I talked business that was appropriate at the time.
Ouch. That's a great but hurtful lesson. Wow, that's awesome. We didn't have that situation in our family, but one thing that we did do that kind of taught our kids to appreciate the things that they have is, we every year we made it a point to try to take a vacation. Sometimes vacation was we went and stayed in grandma and grandpa's spare bedroom and did some fun miniature golf type things around grandma and grandpa's house, and that was it. Basically just paid for gas to get there. Kind of sponged off grandma and grandpa for food for the week. Well, that's what grandma and grandpas do. They love it. As a grandpa, I could say that because it's true. But we had a certain amount budgeted every year for vacation. As things, as we matured and we got better with our money and so forth, we were able to build up a little bit of surplus here and there. We would put stuff away for vacation. And we had a certain amount of money we would spend every year on vacation. Well, the kids wanted to go to Disney World every year. Dad, can we go to Disney World? Can we go to Disney World? And I knew there was no way we could afford to go to Disney World. I mean, there was the amount we spent on vacation every year for 2 weeks. And then there was an amount that Disney World would cost for 1 week that was 3 times the cost of what it would take for a 2 week vacation of just driving and looking at mountains and stuff. And which for my money, the driving and looking at mountains worth way more than the week at Disney World. But anyways, so we sat down with our kids, said, okay, we're going to make an offer to you. If you want to go to Disney World next year, then for an entire year, we're going to have to get a paper route as a family. And when I say a paper route as a family, I mean Monday through Friday, every day after school, the kids would go and deliver, I think it was around 70 to 100 papers. And then on Saturday morning, early, my wife and the kids would go and deliver about 225 to 250 papers every Saturday morning. And I didn't go then because I worked on Saturday, so I had to get up early and go to work while they were doing that. But then on Sunday morning, we all got up at 3 a.m. on Sunday for a pastor's family. And we would roll over 380 newspapers, package them up. I would take my oldest son, my wife would take my oldest daughter, the middle son and the two little ones would stay home and go back to bed. And we would go out and deliver all those 380 papers for hours on Sunday morning. We'd finish up about 7:30. We'd come home, we'd eat breakfast, we'd get dressed, and we'd go to church. And we did that for an entire year. Holidays, Thanksgiving Day, Christmas Day, my kids were up at 3 a.m. rolling big newspapers and taking them out and delivering them. They're looking in kids' doors, they're opening Christmas presents on Christmas morning. My kids are dropping off newspapers. We went home and did our Christmas presents. But I mean, it was for an entire year. And every time they would get discouraged, we'd remind them, you want to go see Mickey Mouse? This is what it takes. And they earned the money. And at the end of that year, we had a family breakfast on Saturday morning. And on their plates, I laid a copy of the confirmation of the flights for going from Chicago to Disney World and the little printout thing from Disney saying, hey, congratulations, you're going to Disney World. And they were so excited. And the first thing they all said was, can we quit the paper route now? And but they learned. And looking back, they occasionally, years later, I mean, we're talking 16 years later, they look back and occasionally will say, oh, yeah, I remember that at Disney World. But you know what every one of them remember? The paper route. They talk about the different houses and the funny names that they gave to the houses, or they talk about, the different things that happen, kid falling on the ice, or the time my wife ran over one of their foot with the car, The time on a Sunday morning I was walking from house to house delivering papers, and about 25 rabbits sprang up out of the snow, went running, and almost gave me a heart attack. Just all the funny things that happened over the course of the year. They remember that a lot better than they remember the fun at Disney World, because those are memories that kids can get. You want to leave your kids with good memories, not with the burden of business that has nothing to do with them.
And I think that's why this is so age appropriate. Appropriate. Don't talk business in front of your children. And so the reality is, though, as they get older, hey, we would love to do this as a family, but this is how we're going to have to do it. And they thought, well, we're all in. And you've made some tremendous progress as a father at that time, and it's still showing proof today. So let me remind our listeners the word communication. We're talking about communication. It is the act of imparting, conferring, or delivering from one to another as the communication of knowledge, opinions, or facts. We want to be appropriate in our distribution of knowledge, information, and facts. And so to tell our children we don't have any money and we don't actually move forward on, put a comma there, we don't have any money, comma, but if you really want to go get some ice cream next week, but there's some things we can do that would be very respectful to our children and also help teach them some financial responsibility. And so here's another thought. And I've got two more before we shut her down this week, but here's another thought. Don't offer things to someone else's children in front of their children. And so let me give you a quick picture, Brother Moore, and then you can help us out. But, if an adult walks up to me and says, hey, can your son come over and swim in our pool? My son would be ecstatic to go swim in their pool. But what if we have something else we've already planned as a family? Now you're making me the bad guy. And so I would encourage you adults to speak to other adults without the presence of any of the children. And that way, really, we're not throwing anybody under the bus and not hurting feelings and causing any friction that shouldn't be there. And so there's a lot more I could say about that. But any thoughts that come to mind, Brother Moore, about that, not offering to someone else's children in front of those children?
Absolutely. I mean, we talked last week about communicating to our kids with respect. One of the things we want to respect is feelings. Everybody has feelings, and children have feelings ungoverned by experience. You can say something to me that my experience has shown you did not say it in a hurtful way. You didn't mean it in a hurtful way. Children lack that. They don't have the experience. As you mentioned, for example, someone could come to you and say, hey, could your son come to my house to swim in the pool? And a reason why. And I'll give you an example from my own growing up years. My parents were very strict on who my siblings and I were allowed to go over to their house to play. Even people in our church would sometimes invite us over to their house to play, play with their kids. And my dad and mom would say, no, I'm sorry, your kids can come to our house, but we don't let our kids go to just anybody's house. And it was because they knew those families allowed their kids to, wander around town on their bikes and to do things that we weren't allowed to do. And so my parents would have to say, no, I'm sorry, they can't come over to your house, but you're welcome to come to our house. And they did it in a way so as not to try to hurt feelings, but to establish definite, boundaries for my siblings and I. But let's say in your scenario, you said, somebody said, hey, Brother AJ, can your son come to my house? And they said it in front of your son, and you said no. Not only could that cause your son to think of you, well, dad doesn't let me have any fun, but it could cause that person and their kid to think, well, wow, he just doesn't like us, or he doesn't, well, no, there's a reason behind it. But you put somebody on a spot like that, and it's really hard to get into all the reasons why that won't work. Whereas if they would have come to you in private and said, "Hey, can your son come over?" Maybe you could have said, "Hey, listen, I'm trying to teach my son some things right now, and one of them is personal responsibility, and frankly, he doesn't have it, and so I can't, it's not that I don't trust you, it's not that I don't like you, it's him. He's the issue. I need him home, and I don't want to say that to him because I don't want him to try to put on an air that, just to get by. I want him to learn these concepts, these lessons." That's something you could say in private. You could not say in front of your son. So it's so important. It's just being respectful of people's feelings.
Yeah, it would be very age inappropriate to say what you said in front of your son.
Absolutely.
Because you said something there, the word no, just no. As an adult, I hear the word no, I can put some cushion to that. As a child, I hear the word no, and my whole world came to an end. We have no cushion, no filter, no understanding. And so give the other adult an opportunity to say no without hurting your child, their child, or even you adults. Sadly, your feelings, adults, are on your shoulders too. And so we all have to be mature in the faith, given the benefit of the doubt. I've got a podcast coming on that, given the benefit of the doubt. But what is age appropriate? And we're coming against our time. And so I want you to comment one more on this, and then I've got one more to plug. Go ahead, Brother Moore.
I was just going to say real quick, not only should you not talk to the other adult in front of the child, but to go to the child and say, "Hey, child, would you like to come to our house and go swimming? Let's just ask your dad who's right here." And the child's already like, "Yeah, can I?" And then the dad has to say no, right? It's inappropriate to offer something to someone else's child when that parent has not been approached first. And I would just add, in today's society and the things that are prevalent in today's society, we're to be above reproach. Before I ever offer something to another person's child, even on the most purest of motivations, I'm going to talk to that parent first. So the parent knows what I'm doing, the parent has approved what I'm doing, and there is no question of anything being inappropriate. As a parent, I am automatically, my default setting is everybody else is going to hurt my kids. I'm going to have to protect them. And that's the default setting I think we have to be at today. I hear of parents saying, "Oh, anybody could take my kids." What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? No one has earned the right to your children to be in their presence, to give them attention until they have earned your trust. And it doesn't matter what position they're in. And that includes even family positions. I'm a grandparent. My grandkids, I love them like I loved my kids. I would give myself for them like I would give myself for my kids. But my grandkids' parents have a responsibility to make sure that I earn their trust before I have access to their kids.
That's good. And as a pastor, I'll even use this. We have ladies' meetings in our church for the ladies of our church. And I like to invite other ladies outside of our church to come speak to our ladies and our teenage girls, etc. And I don't ask the pastor's wife or the layman's wife directly first. I go to the husband. Why? Out of respect above all, but also to protect the husband to say no. When I ask the husband, he says, my wife doesn't do that. I have been that husband. My wife has a beautiful singing voice. She's an amazing teacher, but many a pastor have come to me. I mean, we have 12 children, so they just say, "Hey, can your wife speak to our ladies? And I'll tell them, "Thank you for asking me, but my wife is not gifted in that area. She sings, she does this, that, and the other, but she is wired for behind the scenes and loves it." And so what that pastor then does is go, "Oh, okay, man, thanks for letting me know." And now we've prevented any issues from coming up. So it's not just for our teenagers, our children. You mentioned grandparents. I'm looking forward to addressing that a little more next week. But the reality is for everyone, it's communication. We're trying to be appropriate. And here's the last thing. I know we're against our time, Pastor Moore, but what about this one? Don't argue in front of your children. Is there an alternative to arguing in front of our children?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's important for kids to grow up with an understanding of the totality of communication, if you will. You hear people say, "We've been married 50 years and never had a disagreement." That simply is not physically possible because you get two people in a room and you've got at least three opinions, right? There's no such thing as going a length of time with two human beings without some type of disagreement about something. But you can disagree without arguing. I have two sons that are police officers, and they have responded to calls of domestic violence. And, domestic violence 99 times out of 100 starts over something just absolutely petty and ridiculous. And then it results in actual physical violence that requires an arrest of someone to be made. It's unbelievable some of the stuff that people argue over, to the point of being physically violent with someone they're supposed to love. And the idea is a disagreement ought to be for the purpose of resolution. Too many times we have disagreements for the purpose of proving I'm right. Resolution can mean I'm right, or it can mean the other person's right. An inability to admit that the other person's right. Let me give you an example. I think everyone knows by now, I love pizza. Pizza is my favorite food beyond any other food. It's my default setting. I love pizza. I am something of a purist. I don't like pizza with, seafood on it. That's not pizza. If you want pizza, pizza has a dough crust and a tomato sauce, not an Alfredo sauce, not a pesto sauce, a tomato-based sauce, and it has mozzarella cheese. It could maybe have a little bit of Parmesan or something, but it has mozzarella cheese, and then like pepperoni or sausage, or first, some, if you want to put some veggies on it, fine. But pizza doesn't have fish, it doesn't have clams, it doesn't have all these weird things on it. But there is this move, among, and I don't mean to pick on you ladies, but there's anything that's flat in a circle, we call it pizza. No, it's not. If you have a flat circle that's a pastry and you put cream cheese on it and you put like strawberry jam on it, that's not pizza. Okay, I'm sorry, it may be delicious, but it's not pizza. Well, the big trend is to do away with the flour-based dough crust and replace it with cauliflower. And that is just like, I'm going to slap you in the face, and then I'm going to slap you in the face a second time harder, because it's not pizza and it's cauliflower. Maybe the most revolting of vegetables next to Brussels sprouts that ever grew up. There's no question in my mind, cauliflower is part of the curse of sin on the earth. And so I've always been, adamant. It will never have this cauliflower pizza. It's an abomination. We went out to dinner with my son and his daughter, or his wife, my son and my daughter-in-law. And my daughter-in-law is gluten intolerant, and so she can't have regular pizza. But this place had gluten-free crust, and then they also had a cauliflower crust. And my wife and my daughter-in-law ordered a pizza with the cauliflower crust. And it came, and much to my surprise, it didn't look like cauliflower. It looked like pizza crust. And it actually looked pretty good. And I asked my wife, I said, let me just try that. Because I'm sure it's awful. And I want to be able to say, aha, this isn't pizza. And I took a little piece and I broke it off, and it had a nice texture, a nice little crunch to it. It wasn't too hard. It wasn't too soft. It was what I call the baby bear of pizza crust. It was just right. And I put it in my mouth and I chewed it up. And I said, that is amazing. That's some of the best pizza crust I've ever had. And let me tell you, I've had a lot of pizza crust in my life. And I looked at my wife and I said these words, I'm sorry, you were right. They can make pizza crust out of cauliflower. Now, I will tell you, the Italian gentleman who made the pizza, he was speaking a lot of Italian words. Then he'd say cauliflower, and with kind of a little bit of a bite to his voice. I could tell he didn't like making that, but he had to. But but I said, yeah, that was actually really good. Now, if I'm petty, I'm telling no, it's still not. I still don't like it. You could not like it without being argumentative. And the point here is this: when our kids hear their parents, the people who are supposed to work together with the sole goal of raising that child in the nurture and admonition of the Lord to grow and to be a responsible, Christ honoring Christian servant. When they hear those parents bickering and arguing over petty things, what do you think that does to the building of your family? You're trying to build a house and you're cutting the boards too short, and you're using pieces of Scotch tape instead of nails. You're tearing down the very thing you're trying to build. You could disagree. My wife and I will disagree about some things. My kids have heard us disagree, but we need to disagree to a point of resolution. You're right or I'm right. That's not the issue. What the issue is, we come to an agreement, not an argument. So I think that definitely there needs to be no fighting and arguing, but there can be disagreement, which is productive.
I heard somebody say we need to disagree agreeably. And I like how James 1:19 says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." And so these couple few age appropriate tips are awesome. I'm looking forward to diving into this some more next week as well.
Yeah, one more thing I would add to that. What a great opportunity for wives to teach their daughters the principle of submitting to their husbands. Because, submission is not just the husband dictating to everyone, this is what we're going to do. The husband and wife give you a scenario. The husband and wife can have a situation that they disagree. And they talk about it. And the wife has a viewpoint that is opposite of the husband's viewpoint. And the husband listens to the wife's viewpoint, discusses it with her, and at the end says, look, I know this is not the way you think about this, but I'm the husband, and I believe this is what we're supposed to do. And so I'm making the decision for our family. This is the way we're going to go. Submission is the wife embracing what the husband has said and seeking to execute the policy her husband has implemented with a fervor as if it was her idea to begin with. And so for the child to hear the parents disagree, but the husband says, I've listened to you, I've weighed what you said, but I believe this is the right way instead. And the wife to then embrace that and say, not, well, this is what your father said, I think he's crazy. That's not it. But to say, kids, dad and I have discussed this, and dad has decided this is the best way. And we're going to do this because this is the best way, because we trust dad and we want to honor him. And so let's do this. And what a great lesson for the daughters to learn. It's, oh, you're not teaching those girls to be independent women. No, we're not, because that's not biblical. We're teaching them to be wives that submit to their husband as believers are supposed to submit to Christ.
Yes, which goes back to communication. All we're trying to do is to place or impart information, knowledge, and opinions and facts of the Word of God into our loved ones. And so this has been a blessing, Pastor Moore. I'm looking forward as we move forward again next week. This has been really good.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed this one as always. Brother Harold, it's been great talking to you. And, I feel like I've learned some things. And then I'll just tell our listeners, my wife and I have been married 35 years. We've raised 5 kids to adulthood. But I learned something every week from these podcasts, something that I either wish I knew way back when, or that I can at least put into practice today as a parent of adult kids, or as a grandparent, or as a pastor with families in my church. So I hope you're listening to these podcasts. I hope they're being a blessing to you. Just want to remind you of our Facebook group. You want to be watching it when that contest drops. The first 5 that like, share, and comment on the post about the logo will receive 1 free piece of merchandise of your choice. And I'm telling you, this is going to be awesome. you are going to be blown away with how cool this looks. Email us with your questions, your comments, suggestions for topics you'd like to have addressed, and be in touch with other builders to help them with the things that you're learning, and tell them, hey, I learned this on Family Builders Podcast. Thanks so much for being with us for another week. We appreciate you all and look forward to talking to you again next week. Brother Harold, why don't you take us out?
Sure. Thank you for listening to the Family Builders Podcast. Please subscribe and share this week's podcast with your friends and family. Also, if you have any questions for either of us, please do not hesitate to email us at familybuilderspodcast@gmail.com. Who knows? Maybe we'll even answer your question on one of our future episodes. Until next time, Family Builders, never let up.